All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's lesson. And let's just jump right into it. What is this lesson about? In a nutshell, I can't really tell you. It's complex, but it's going to have a wide range of byproducts that you can pick up on, like things to learn. And why does something like this sound good? All over the place. Sounds like there's music there. So, what can you do with it? How can you understand something like this fully? That's what we're going to do in this lesson today. So, I guess getting right into it, you'll find that, well, to start with, we need a number one here. For today's lesson, we're going to need to really explain what we're talking about and find out a whole bunch of cool things. We're going to need a tonal gravity. We're going to need a place that we are in the whole lesson. What's a tonal gravity? That means like a root note. We're going to need a deep down low note. We could also use a higher pedal tone, but in this case, we're going to do it as a lower note. It makes most sense to everybody. Something like that the bass would be playing normally. And that's going to give our ear an established, the root is so important in all of music to establish everything else in relationship to this, to wherever our starting point is in one of our 12 starting points. So our tonal gravity, our root in this lesson, is going to be E, because E is easy to play down low on the guitar. Right? So, and you can see here how, like, a tonal gravity, here's a D chord. No, that's pretty much a D chord. You hear the sound. Alright, now let's play with the E root. Gives a little bit of a different sound since we put our ear into D mode in the beginning. I don't think it jumped out as much, but has its own new unique sound because there's a new tonal gravity. But anyways, so that happens with this chord shape. So let's move on to number 2 here, the shape. We're going to have to move. I love to explain all this, but I do have a lot of slides today, so we're going to have to move right through. And I think I'm going to break this up into part 1 and part 2, but they'll both be uploaded right away. Here we go. So there's the shape. See, it sounds good. Certain ones sound like really good with the root. Sounds like probably the one that would work. But then there's this one. Yeah, it sounds kind of cool too. And it sounds more than it did just alone because it's got that new root, giving it a low, giving it kind of an area to exist. Like an atmosphere. Alright, so why does that one sound good? Some of them will sound tense. Some of them will just sound wrong. So we're going to go, that's what we're going to know. We're going to know all about that today at the end of today's lesson. Hold on, because I think you're going to be amazed. Now get ready that for the lower tonal gravity parts, I may use my keyboard here, which we have set up to the Church of Zeppelin. Right, so something like that. You can hear how some of the chords will just kind of melt right in. Some will shine. Some will be unusual, but they'll fit. As opposed to maybe this one. I don't know if it sounds good, but it doesn't fit the low note. But maybe it does. Some sound mysterious. beginning, and some fit right in. So there's 3 of them then. And that one doesn't really work. So okay, so you get all that. So why is this? Let's totally learn right now. But first, part 2, the shape. So what is this shape? What are we doing? What's this all about? And I'm trying to include the beginners here as well as the theory nerds who like all this stuff. So bear with me here. The shape. A system of harmony is what we're dealing with here. This shape is a bunch of notes that ring together, a chord. It's a harmony. Why does it sound good on its own everywhere? Because as a singular shape with no other tonal gravity, putting the root in different places, with just the shape itself, it has a bunch of standard notes. Well, the notes all change. So what's going on? Well, we describe the way it sounds good, even if we raise the pitch, and raise the pitch again, and raise the pitch again, because the intervals are standard. So we're going to go with our, we're going to talk about intervals real quick. We got more to do on intervals, so it's going to get really, really clear for those brand new to intervals. But that's the language that we're going to use. And the language that creates the ability for us to, it's a little 12-bit language that we are able to communicate all these ideas with. So that's why we want to know intervals, not just note names. So here we have the intervals in this shape, and it's kind of, there is a little bit of a thing that's going on here. So let's look at them. Let's look under the hood, see what the magic is. So the first thing that's happening in this chord shape is a very standard, very common, known even by beginners, root to 5. You know, all your Jenny had a bit of you know, all your basic rock stuff. Sounds great. It's the most, let's talk about that interval a little bit. You know, root to 5, it's going to be like the most, to me, I would describe it as the most harmonious, not in a pleasing sense, but the most like congruent to the root. The one that's going to be the most stable and give it that rock solid rock and roll foundation. So there you go. Root to 5, so important in music and so strong. Confident, and creates a nice basis and a good combination that's going to probably sound pleasing almost anywhere with any tonal gravity. So from the next interval, this one straight down, you'd think that since these are both in a straight line, making the same up and down fret movement or string to string fret movement on the same fret, that they would be the same, but they're not, because this one is crossing that G to B string anomaly. And the cool side learning thing here is that I remember being a beginner guitarist, and I'd always get hung up. I knew my intervals. I'd learn that, okay, underneath a root is always a 4. So if I'm looking for the 4, from this note, it's here. From this note, it's here. And the 5th is above it, and on and on. So to the 5, to the 5. But when I'd get here, since I didn't memorize, that would just always escape me. I think, is that one lower or one higher? Which one is that? And if I'd learned this shape early on, I'd have memorized the intervals with it. I'd be like, oh, well, that's a 3rd, not a 4th. Root to 3rd, the happy interval, the sad interval, flat 3rd. All right, so we get a root to 3rd in this chord. Now, when we move the tonal gravity, these are going to jump around. I don't want anyone to think that what we're describing here is what's hard and fast in this chord. If we keep it in one position against one tonal gravity, then yes, this would be these intervals. But if we move things around, we're moving the tonal gravity, the intervals, the combinations or the positions will change, but the dynamic of this structure is the same. It's what you're hearing every time. That's why there's like a similarity but a difference. There's a similarity here, even though all the intervals are changing. There's like a workability between all these three choices. That might be the stability that you're hearing in the structure. Even though the moods are changing against every stable tonal gravity of E. Don't worry if that doesn't make any sense. We're going to get to the bottom of all of that through the lesson here. So we have a third and a fourth. So we know our third to be our note that makes a major chord, and our fourth is one that makes, if we leave out the 3 and choose a 4 instead, we've got a suspended chord. So it's got that kind of quality to it. A nice spacey interval, a nice happy interval, and a rock and roll interval. So 3, 4, and 5 really just jumbled on top of each other, mixed around a bit. So the final thing to know is this, but just to finally absorb all that. So there's the basic intervals to our chord. Some adjustments that we will make throughout the lesson. I might talk about these briefly. So we should know about the possibility here, which is just great because you can take this lesson today, if you learn anything from it, and go down some of these other avenues here for your own safari hunt and exploration in the music you create. Speaking of music that we create, maybe at the end of the lesson, I don't think I'll be able to do it, but I created a song. I put it on my TikTok. Maybe I'll leave a link. To a song I made using this chord shape, using 2 different ones where I changed keys in the song, and I made a song out of it. Put it to some video, some driving stuff. It's pretty random, but you can hear the music I made, so you can know that this is like musical and something you could really use to build a song with. Okay, so from this shape here, see if I'm on camera. If I move my index finger up 1 fret, the gray note denotes where we were, so you can see, like, if you're familiar with this shape, hopefully by now, pretty simple, right? It's like a extended bar chord. It's basically the same as playing a major chord up here, like C major right here. We're just down on the D string as a root. So if I move my index up, you can hear it sounds more like a jazz chord, and it is. Because if you change these intervals around, these can spell out much more common chords. But in this regard here, you can think, all right, the root is up, so we've got like a flat 2 against all our other intervals there, but not necessarily. It's not how I think about it. Anyways, you're going to use that in like jazz, maybe for 5 chord or dominant chord sounds. Anyways, but it also comes up in this lesson. So we'll check that out. Anyways, this is the add-in area. We're also going to call this the choice box. You'll see that coming up later in the lesson. So just remember that whatever's right here, sometimes we want to know, you're going to see why. Down here at the bottom of the, at this note, you're going to want to know the next 2 notes. You're going to want to know what they are. That's going to be important in this lesson. Now, those notes are always under this root note that you've chosen. So if I'm here on the 5th fret, it's going to be on the G string on the 5th fret. Whatever those notes are going to be the notes I want to know about. Because I'm going to be deliberately choosing one of these notes to create an atmosphere out of each one of these shapes. It's very easy to do, but it's like a complex thing that's real easy to do, so just, make sure you stay tuned. This is going to be really very, very neat for you, I think. Okay, so now this falls outside the lesson a little bit, but these are handy to know. If I were to take this note right here and lower this one down, oh, by the way, I didn't play, so if I lower this down 1, it's almost like I've in a standalone sense, it's like I've got a flat fifth in there now. Root, flat fifth, 7/3. And it gives me a tritone right there. So let's hear it. Sounds pretty tense, but sounds like it could have a purpose. Doesn't sound like that outside. It doesn't sound wrong. It just sounds really tense. Questioning something or other. Now, if I take that one out, we're going to use this one all the way underneath that root. We talked about that earlier. It's a 4. I think you hear it sounds more mellowed out, a little more spacey. Because we got that 4, regular 4 working in there now, giving it that suspended effect. All right, so there's that. So there's this one here. I can also lower this note down, and that gives me a shape that I'm very familiar with. If I play it up here on the 5th string, it's my major 7 chord shape. So I just played a D root, and I'm playing the D major 7 chord. Why is it major 7? Because we have that major 7, the 7 that's just before the root there. Now, however, if we're down here on this string, remember this. We had a regular 7 in a regular shape here because of that B string anomaly, right? So if I just lower that down, what do I have? I have the flatted 7. So this shape that normally makes a major 7 is a shape that makes a dominant 7 down here. Whoa. Oh, yeah, okay, we could hear it resolve. That was a G. Because their root was on G. And then it's going to go to C. Most commonly. Doesn't always have to, but... Alright, so we got this. We should probably write that as a note there, so you can too. Dominant 7. Here we have a... if we lower this bottom one down, we're taking the 3rd and we're lowering it down to a flat 3rd. So there's a great little lesson here for beginners. If we lower that down, it sounds like, oh, you've got a minor chord then. And hey, what do you know? It's the same shape as the minor chord, a string above. But when we're like, wait a minute, that doesn't always translate without extra. So, and why does it sound bad? Not bad, but something's not normal minor with this one. So let's hear that. We're okay there, and we're okay there, but we're hopeful there, but now we're tense. So we've got a mixture of hopeful and tense, which is a very particular sound, and you're going to find that in a lot of jazz because that is a major 7 with a minor 3rd. That is going to be found in the melodic minor scale. That's going to be like the hallmark of a melodic minor scale is that raised 7th with the minor 3rd. A minor 3rd typically pairs itself like a fine wine and a cheese with the flatted 7. Sadder 7, sadder 3rd, good pair. So that leaves this shape down here that gives us a perfect minor 7 sound. Now, it's unfortunate to me because, boy, golly gee, do I hate that shape. But I'm getting used to playing it. Like, real quick, you got to put both fingers down here. I mean, that's the best way I finger it, but maybe you could go, I don't know, figure something else out there, but it's a little slow to grab in my book. But if you need it, you're right there in this area and you need your G minor 7 sound, it's going to be all those notes right there. So, like that. Alright, So let's organize and simplify chord versus scale. So the next thing we gotta know, let's be done with this. Moving on. So can't elaborate on that anymore, but we are done. Um, this shape, to really make this lesson kick, I'm going to show you that this shape plugs in to these scales, but it's particular, and because it's particular, it sounds like it would be like so hard to know like how to get. You can get basically every time I play one of these, I'm going to show you how I can get two different key center shapes. It's like one will be Aeolian, one will be Lydian. I can get like two modal sounds out of one of these shapes. And I'm going to show you that it's actually very, very easy if you organize and your visualization. So let's do that. Let's organize and simplify chord versus scale. I'm going to show you how right here. So the last thing on this scale shape. Here we are. As a refresher. Alright, so let's make this shape and the two related scales very easy. So here we have on the guitar fretboard the key of C. Now, so here it is, the major scale on the fretboard. That looks complex, right? Oh my gosh, like look at all this stuff. But if you memorize the simple ways how it works, that is in other lessons on this channel, you'll know there's simple navigation ways to... Alright, so before I get to lose everybody there, that's the key of C. You play it all over the fretboard. Where does this shape fall into this scale? Does it fall like, are there like 3 different places, 5 different places, only one place? What actually happens is that it's really handy that there's 2 exact places where you can fit this shape into the major scale, but that's it. So that means that there's definite places where the scale will sound good, and there's 2 different ones, which gives us a neat variety, but it's not like too much to learn. So because these are going to be like, this is going to create like 2 different key centers, because if you can kind of, if you're a beginner you won't see this, but it'll make sense to you if you're to intermediates, where they would see like, okay, so I'm playing it from this position in the scale, I'll get all these intervals in relation here. Same shape, I'll get a different series of intervals if I position it in this area and then play my visualized scale here. But the key thing is that actually, in this, while this sounds like a super new complex area of notes, it's actually only one note is changing. And we can use 2 scale shapes to do that. So maybe this didn't jump out at you, but check this out. So we can make this easy to apply anywhere like this. We're going to take our scale shape here and use the red X notes in the shape. So in this shape, I'm thinking about these 3 notes. I'm going to move this down 1 fret. So here I am on the 4th fret. That's going to be the back wall of my scale. And it's going to be very easy because the scale starts with a shape that you already know. So we're going to use this shape against that same chord shape or this one. And you can forget about the rest of the notes, because once I know this, I'm in one of these scale shapes, I know the rest from there. So that's not even anything I have to worry about anymore. If you need to do that homework, then that's where you are in your progress, and that's totally fine. But just so you know, like, it'll get better in case this seems like limited, like you would only know like one place on the guitar, but you'll know the whole fretboard and you'll know what key you're in and everything else just by starting like this. So, here I didn't make my my X's red there. All right, so in this regard, we can see it better like this. So both shapes have a pentatonic framework. So here I am, once again, nothing changed. It's key C. All the boxes are the same, but now there's some blue ones to show you that. If I needed, whenever I need a scale, you can see it's the same on both of them. As soon as I need a scale, it's going to be here. Or maybe I'm up here. You can see that pentatonic plugs right in. Alright, so now that we got that, we need the gut notes here, and that's these gray notes. We'll just kind of visualize there. And I just wanted to show you here with the circular jerk here that. Sorry, my mind. The note here is the same. I'm sorry, the note here is the only thing that changes. This note, moving back to this side, creates this scale. And they're both found within the major scale. Now, don't get lost on, well, how does that work? And how could I even know that? You don't even have to. It's just like put that in your mind as what's happening, and that should be all you need. But if there's some other question comes up, that can be the what you fall back to as an answer, like, oh, that's why, or that's where I'm going, or that's why these keys sound closely related, blah, blah, blah. Anything like that. Okay, so we've got that understood now. You're going to plug in either this way, but they look like, basically completely different scale shapes just from that one note move, which is really neat. But anyway, so I'll just play them both from the 5th fret here. The first, this one. Again, from the 5th fret, I'll play this shape here. And let's give them a name. Let's call this one lighter, that we just played. Now we're going to call this one darker. Why? Because this note that we've changed is moved up. It's higher. It's going to create a lighter, it's going to be the happier version of the two scales. If one of them is like, one of the modes that sounds a little, darker than the other mode, the darker one is you'll see that they line up like that. So we have from the 5th fret, the darker scale. So what that does is, by calling them lighter and darker, they actually have names in conventional teaching. This shape is considered starting from this note here. And so in the key of C, that's A. A is the 6th note of C. 6 is the Aeolian, the A, the 6 is where the Aeolian mode is going to start if the root note is here on A. And all the melodies are here. It's Aeolian in sound. If I played this scale with the A root, it would be Phrygian in sound. But if I start calling them that name, then beginners will get stuck thinking why isn't that always Phrygian sounding? Why is this going to sound like Dorian sometimes? And I'm going to make this one sound like, we have to get used to, beginners always get lost on this, but you'll because there's like a dynamic system here that's working. It's the beginners don't know really about the effect of importance of root notes, like we discussed earlier, that tonal gravity. So that's what causes all this, is the tonal gravity against these scale choices. So that's why you can get these. Don't pigeonhole yourself with naming these scale shapes one sound, because that is actually what is getting people lost. Just because it's a quick way to identify them by their position in the scale, but it throws people off as far as trying to make certain sounds and make music that has certain sounds. All right, not sounds, but certain emotions or atmospheres. So what to know about the intervals for this lesson is I take a handy dandy sip of water. I really needed to refresh there. So, what to know about the intervals for this lesson? So, harmony is what we're dealing with here with this chord. So, we have a chord shape. It's harmony. What's this harmony? We talked about it earlier when we went into the scale shape stuff. This is what we were talking about earlier, that everything is going to be intervals. And that is how you discuss and make sense. It's like an alphabet, 12-bit alphabet. It's not 26 letters like the first one you had to learn, or I don't know where you're from, but you probably understand English if you're watching this lesson this far in. But anyways, it's a 12-bit language, pretty easy to know, and it's important. And it's going to basically clue us into everything we need to know from here, as long as we do this. We organize this set of information. So here we have all the intervals from 1 to 12. As you see here, R to R, root to root. So it's an octave higher. We have all 12 names for each interval, and they can sound like a jumble. There's the flat 2, the 2, the flat 3, the 3, the 4, the flat 5, 5, sharp 5, 6, flat 7, blah, 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 blah. And it sounds like it must be a bunch of blah, blah in the beginning, but this is what helps you understand things that note names won't necessarily tell you. It's like about relationships and sonic relationships, and why certain sounds, it's all because that music you're hearing is all about pairs of notes and harmonies. And this is how you really talk about harmony and understand it. So, in regular, conventional alphabet jargon, the 5 is so strong that these notes are often labeled by their relationship to the 5. So we'll have 4 going to flat 5 and 5, and then you're usually doing something with the 5. You might be extending it higher in pitch and making it a sharp 5, lowering it in pitch, making it the flat 5, and on and on. But that kind of misses out on a fundamental learning thing we're going to see in this lesson here. So we're going to rethink these intervals and then kind of see how they fit into these little sonic groups. So from the root, you can see we have pairs, and it becomes actually a little more, for beginners, this is a little bit more memorizable. It's not the word I was looking for, but memorizable. Memorable, I think, for a beginner to get the notes, is to break them into pairs. So, okay, there's these 2s, and it's going to be a flat 2 or a 2, a half step or a whole step. Then we have leaps, and we're getting to a flat 3rd and a 3rd. And then for the 4s, now we'll consider those a pair, 4 and sharp 4. And I say, what about 5? Why doesn't 5 have a pair? Well, remember what I said earlier, your biggest accomplice to the root, the same way the root doesn't really have a pair per se, the root and the 5 are, strong accomplices with each other. So they're going to kind of operate the same. Like, think about this, when you're going to solo and you want to, end a line or start on the inside, on beat 1 to be really inside, going from outside to inside on your next chord, you're going to be in on the 5, it really in on the root, but the root is almost like ending. If you're going to kind of still go somewhere, the 5 is a great way to nail a chord change on beat 1, yet still have, room to travel a little bit if you want to play some other melody on the new chord, on the changed chord. So there's that. That's why that's kind of on its own. So then that gives us then the flat 6 and the 6, and the flat 7 and 7. And the final thing you want to note here is just a little anomaly here, but it's the way the music works. Generally speaking, notes on the left here, just like we talked about with another feature earlier, notes on the left are lower. Flat notes on the notes are higher. Those tend to be the regular choices. So 2 and flat 2, if we have a root. 2 and flat 2. So 3, flat 3, a little bit more serious, right? So on the 4, though, the 4 works a little bit different because the 4 is the regular note in the scale. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Going to the 5. But if you Here the modification would then be raising the 4. That's why the 4 has a sharp 4. So all I'm doing is playing the sharp 4 in there. Sounds like a scale, but people like that sounds a little bit more majestic than this. If I would just want to sound a little bit more handsome, a little more regular, I'm going to have a regular 4. If I want to sound a little more spacey. Alright, so I always describe that every other lesson we go over the sharp 4. So let's say you know what it is. Alright, so now let's find out then, using this interval thing, there's actually a little trick here. There's some magic right here that you just went over. And this magic is exactly the reason we can figure out visually and see it for ourselves why, compared to in E root, this sounds good. A half step up, which should normally sound bad, sounds kind of off, but there is some music there. And we're going to find out about that one in a second. But so there's the reason why that one would sound good. But this one does not necessarily sound that great, no matter what you do. Let's hear that with the, now me playing the root. Now there's just too much sonically going in weird directions there, so that doesn't sound good. There's a completely clear reason why it does that. So here it is. So we went over those intervals, and you're gonna have to forgive the lawnmower that's happening now, but it is what it is. So we have a basically, let's check out the shape here where we have one that's workable. And then we have one that's not ideal. And what we're going to check out here is something that, I'm going to go back to something here. And you know what? When I was here, I forgot a little important piece that we're just going to go over right now because we're right up to knowing that. So, what I had forgot to write here is this. Let me get over to draw as fast as I can. Get over here, and then this one. This was the most important one, and I forgot it. This interval here, between there and there, is our magic interval. This is what's going to make today's lesson happen. This is an interval. This provides us with a half step. Oh, you know what? I can't do that because it'll mess. Well, we'll just go half step. That's very important. You know, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. This is what I think about this. I don't have any major background or any kind of concrete proof to this, but you know, when it comes to regular music, I got to put something kind of be brief about a big topic here. People know that the 5 chord moves to the 1 chord because the 5 chord has that pull, and it has that pull because it has that tritone interval that it just wants to be resolved. It wants to resolve to this. So, It's that tension in that tritone interval. Well, this half step interval kind of does the same thing. It wants to resolve. So I think that builds up this kind of it's part of the reason that there's some intrigue into this chord shape, into the sounds of these intervals together, is the fact that you have that weird half step in there, and then this one to this one, I believe, is a whole step, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, it's a leap. Anyways, not a big deal. The big important thing right now is that half step. So let's go back here and see why that makes a big deal. So what happens is, now think about this. Think about a chord. When you have a chord, you basically have one from each of these shapes. So let's say I had a major chord. I would have a root, a third, and a fifth. The root, one of these blue intervals, and the 5. Cool. Now if I want to add some extensions, I might put the 9 in there. It's going to be one of these gray ones. And I put an 11 in there. It's going to be one of these yellow. And I put a 13 in there. Flat 13, regular 13. Regular 11, sharp 11. So it corresponds with the note that you're choosing from. So that's pretty easy. 7 always stays a 7. 5 always stays a 5. A third's always going to stay a third. They're strong and obvious intervals, and that's why they do that. But we may want a choice of one of these in our chords. So specifically, there's never been a chord. Well, it's not that there's never been a chord, but you don't want a chord to be too crowded. When you start adding in all these intervals, it's getting a little crowded, but they tend to be up in register. A lot easier to play for a piano player to do these intervals. Guitarists tend to just comp them and get a little crowded. But anyways, with the tones a little crowded. But typically speaking, to get to the point here, you don't find chords with a flat 2 and a 2. A chord with a 4 and a sharp 4. With a 6 and a 6 occurring. That would be just a jumble of confusion. What is there? What are we hearing? Are we supposed to hear the 6 or the flat 6? These are, different emotions, different sonic experiences for each of these chords. And you don't want to have two sonic experiences because it's like, well, which one is it? So that's when they don't work. And guess what happens to line up with all the ones that sound bad? Those are the ones that have double intervals in them. So since this is a half step, if I put this on the 2, this note here, this note here is always a step behind this note. So like right here would be a flat 2 and a 2. So here's a 2, here's our octave. That's a, easiest way to see that. So one back. You can hear the difference in sounds there. Now you have you're playing a half step pair of notes. That's a tough sell. Not the worst, but it's something's very tense about it. Okay, so that being said, that color's bugging me. There we go. You can see why some of these, the ones that don't sound good, are the ones with double intervals, and the ones that sounded halfway usable and are workable, because I'm going to show you can pair up these particular ones with these scale choices, and they're going to sound really good. So did we go over all that? Yeah, we went over all this, why they come from certain scales. Okay. So that being said, like we can see it down here then. So this half step interval eliminates some harmonic possibilities. No two intervals from one group. It's too crowded, and there's no matching scales. There's no scale with a 2 and a flat 2. I can't point you to a scale with a 4 and a sharp 4. So that's another reason why those don't work. But these ones do. So you can see there's no 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4, 5 and 5. Now, check out the math here. It just starts getting really cool. And by the way, I put the arrow going this way, but we already kind of talked about that. This is going this way. So if I have for example, here's my root, a flat third. So if I have a flat third, I'm going backwards. My second interval here is going to be a 2. So what I'm trying to tell you here is this is where you could draw your choices from. Is you always know which chord is going to work, because if I choose a flat 2, I'll have a root. Cool. But if I put my interval on a 2 from E, where's the 2 from E? It's F sharp. So it's there. If I put my chord shape on the 2, I got a 2 and a flat 2. Sounds okay on its own, but with the root, maybe not. No. Doesn't sound good. Okay, so. But if I move it up one, then I got the 3 and the flat 3. But then if I move it up one more, I've got the regular 3. If I put it on the regular 3, I'm going to have a flat third in there. No good. If I put it, so as you see here, if you put it on the note to the right, you're going to get the note on the left. You don't want double orange, double blue. So that's pretty easy to know then. Just use your flat notes. Use the lower of your, when you're on a choice, use the lower one. If you're at the 5, use the 5. If you're moving toward the 6, you're going to use the flat 6. Going to move up to the 7th note, you're going to use a flat 7. So what that does is it gives us, this is where we were going to look at the math here, 5 choices are now eliminated. So if we take 5 out of 12, that leaves us 7 choices. Hey, 7 choices, wouldn't that work like a scale? Let's see, what are our choices? Here we get 7 sensible root choices, and what do you know? We got one from the 2, one from the 3, we have a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, and back to the root. That's like a scale. And this helps us memorize our immediate possibilities is what this does. What this does not do is for everybody that's going right now looking at this going, oh, the intermediate, the theory geeks are going, yeah, root, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 6, flat 7. That's the Phrygian scale. Oh, so this makes, we use the Phrygian scale, but why is that? Why not the Dorian scale? Why doesn't Aeolian work? Why? It's kind of random that it's the Phrygian scale that ends up working, and that's true. And then that leads us to maybe tangent off there and go, ooh, what's so special about this? What's the big meaning behind Phrygian? This is usually like how my mind works. I discover these things because I follow some of these clues, but I'm just trying to tell you that I didn't tangent off here because that's a distraction. We don't need to know that. That's the Phrygian scale. I just said, okay, you know what? Good enough. It made that pattern. I might find an implication to that later on, but for right now, no idea. Cool enough for me. Fair enough. Good enough. That's what that is. So that's why we're just going to move on. And I didn't list it in case you're wondering, like, hey, doesn't he know that that's the Phrygian scale? Yeah, that's the Phrygian scale. That's the notes that make that up. But we don't want to tangent off on that. But what we do want to know as a final thing before we get into the actual, these chord shapes and which ones actually sound good and actually why. Well, we kind of know actually why now, but this is what we want to know too, important to know here. Like we talked about earlier, how it's basically in our scale shape, this is where our choice box is going to be. But it's way over here, and you know, we're kind of considering we might know, okay, we started on a half step here. But by the time you get up here, like, oh, what's that note? Oh, you gotta think, oh, it's the E, and then an E. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fourth of E. E, that's A. That's gotta, yeah, that's an A note. Okay. You know, there's a lot of thinking to do, but if you just know that, here are going to be your changes. Which one do you want? Do you want the sharp 4? Do you want the... it's not going to involve this much thought, but all I'm trying to tell you here is this is the same shape. So if you want to figure out what your choices are up here, it's down here. Or if you want to match up your scale with your scale choice, if you chose this one or this one, to a chord trick, you might be playing... I don't know if you can see what I did there. Let me make sure I'm on camera here. So instead of we're lowering that one note like we talked about in our shapes diagram with the little alterations that we could make. So here I'm playing the Y, right? Here I'm going to play the X. So that would depend on, or this. You're just trying to match up the same note. You might get a chord sequence, a little chord thing to play, like kind of like this. You might say, I don't know, I've never heard that in a song, but hey, listen to this. Atlanta rhythm section. Spooky, yeah, spooky. It's Spooky by the Atlanta rhythm section. Maybe not that exact chord and shape, but that's the mechanism that they're basically playing around with there, taking a third and lowering it down. Pretty sure in their example that's a third, but either way they're taking that note of the chord and lowering that down. Okay. So in essence, they, may have been playing with the scale ultimately that had the Y, and were not playing the X. Okay, so then basically, now that we understand all that, here we go. That's all we need to understand to go. Now let's examine all these choices. So here they are. Here's that shape and the Phrygian scale that we discovered that we're going to put them in. And now we can see all the intervals. We'll talk about those really quick, but we'll talk about those individual with each chord. So, for example, now we can see, this is why the one here, the very first one here, sounds good on the second fret. Because we're starting with a root. Oh, yeah. That's the octave of the E. That's the root. 5, 7, 3. It's a major 7 chord all day long. So, why would that major 7 chord sound good? So let's go and check it out here. Oh, we see it's a major 7, the root 5, 7, 3. There's the spelling. And so we can kind of see here with the other chords listed what intervals we get. We have a 4, and since this is our choice box, we actually have a choice between a 4 and a sharp 4 and a 5. Do our theory geeks get the implications of that? I think the geeks did. The beginners are going, okay, sharp 4. What does that mean? I'll show you in a second here. It means you're going to get two different scales, two different E of two different varieties here. So if we use our darker scale, here's our formula. We're going to get a root, our chord here with our tonal gravity. Sound pretty basic. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. E major scale. So this gives us straight E major. Cool. So what if we use our trick there? We take and we use the lighter scale. We got our pentatonic framework in place. So you see how the pentatonic scale sounds, it actually sounds like a frame. Now we're going to add in this Lydian sound here. We're going to do that because we're going to just simply use the lighter scale shape. Gives us all the same other notes, except we got the sharp 4. Boy, that really sounded like... played the wrong scale. Start again. Here comes the magic note. So you see I'm playing way up here. And there I ended on that third scale note. So anyways, I wanted to get to that sharp 4 again. Alright, so you get the point. I just like to jam. So there is the basically, wow, cool. But now there's more. There's this little thing happening, or possibility, for every one of those different shapes. So we just discovered that we got major and Lydian, and it's both E. By the way, you say, well, what Lydian, what major? Well, our E is our tonal gravity. So we just went from E major to E Lydian, a 1-note difference. And so you can use that in a song. If you just need E Lydian in a song, you know how to get it. If you just want E major, if you want any major anywhere else, you know where your root is. Alright, so cool. Let's move on to our next one here. Our next one in line comes from the flat 2. Now that's crazy. So let's think about this. So first of all, what you want to do with any of these is know where your intervals are, so you know what you got. You know, you got a flat 2, flat 6, a root, a 4. We know our E is right here, so our shape is going to have some relation to our tonal gravity here by this note. So then what we have here, though, is this 2, and then we have this flat 6. We hear that a lot when we hear minor and Aeolian, so I think it's probably going to be a minor. So this note here, the 4, can kind of fit in with the minor crowd and the major crowd. So it's kind of there, little kind of placeholder note. But as we showed you earlier, it has its way to Okay, so what did we do there? So we're doing the, what I had played there actually was the, let's fill it in. That's what I did here. So we'll put our darker scale in. We're just going to see, well, basically what note do we get right in here is going to be what really tells us everything about what are we going to get from this? Because here we got, like, what could be the makings of a minor sound, but it's open to two different scales. So what can we get out of this? Well, let's start adding in our scale tones here. We'll go with a, what were we using for, we're using this color here for our gut notes. So our darker scale is going to use this one, and then this one, and that one. All right, so then what do we have here? Now you might ask about this one. How come this one doesn't toggle between this one and this one? Because we have this note in right here. We're already kind of pigeonholing ourselves into only this note choice, not this note choice here, because we are playing that note in the chord. If we want to make that alteration, if I do want to play this scale up here, we'll call this the brightest scale here, because both of them would be on the brightest side. Then I would move this up here. So then I would have my root here. And you would have that sound available there for Dorian. But that's why we only have to worry about this with this method we're using with this chord shape. Okay, so and that's a whole nother lesson. We could just do that with the Dorian shape there, but maybe we'll do that sometime. Okay, so we know that we got a flat 2 here, and we say, oh yeah, okay, there's that flat 2 that's in our chord. Well, yeah, we were just talking about how that's that note. So the 4, what we're getting here then, if we're past a 4, we don't want to say that it's a sharp 4. So here we're going to call it a flat 5. All right? Because we've got a 4. So like I said, there's no scale that's going to have a 4 and a sharp 4, but this one will. But you're going to see why in a second, because you're going to say, well, geez, is that scale like really widely used if it has those two intervals? And you're going to see here that it's not. So we'll make that our 6, our root, after our 2s. It's going to be our flat 3rd. Oh, and by the way, this is going to be a regular 5, so this is going to be our flatted 6. So what do we got after our flatted 6? That would be our regular 6, flatted 7 will be there, because everything is... So this creates everything is basically flat. So it's a whole flat tire scale, or the Locrian scale, roots. Go here, flat 2. We'll list them all. When you line them all up, sometimes it gets a little bit more obvious as to what it is. So we got the 4. From the 4, we got the flat 5. Then we got a flatted 6, a flatted 7, and a skip a note and a root. So you can see here we've got the makings of the major scale. There's the pattern is there, the whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. So you know this pattern, okay, it's coming from the major scale. This is a shape derived from the major scale, so that all lines up. And then we can see here where we have placed our root. That creates root, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7 root. That is, my friends, diminished. Everything is diminished. The 2 diminished, the 3rd diminished, 5 diminished, diminished. It's actually, though, considered a half diminished. There is a full diminished chord because you can diminish the 7th. Since this is actually congruent, we talked about this earlier, the flat 7 is congruent with the flat 3rd. It's typical in a minor chord. If you want to go, then take this diminished concept further, you would diminish that and have a 6 down here. We're getting way off in a tangent here that's causing there to be other explanations. We don't want to go there. Just know that this is a Phrygian scale. Or no, I'm sorry. My bad. Locrian. It's actually the quickest way I could have got to that point here. So we get Locrian. Oh, okay. When do you use Locrian? Not very much, but there are sometimes I've been using it, and I use it more like an arpeggio. I don't play the whole scale when I play Locrian anyways, so this is kind of, will you ever use this? I don't know. But if we take this and put our lighter scale in there, we actually change to a regular 5, then the flat 6, and the flat 3rd, and the flatted 2, And then if you consider that scale, you get something that you recognize as root flat 2, flat third with a 4. That's looking like it could very well be. Something's messed up there, but we're going to roll with it for now. We're going to roll with it. Yeah. Flat 6, flatted 7, roots. So, I, for some reason, have something off here, but to just be super simple here, we're going to go here. We're going to let's put all our intervals in here then. See where we've gone wrong. Flatted 7. That's going to be our root. So that should be on the E. So then we're going to have our flat 2 there. All right, so So, for some reason or other, I'm having this real brain fart here. Ah, that's what I did wrong here. Okay, I see what I did wrong here. I put my, I was thinking 4 after 3. Well, that's a flat third, so we have to skip there. Now, everything is off here, so we're just going to delete all of that and go 4. And then we've got the flat 5. Now we've got the makings of our scale here. Okay, so we don't have a flat 5. This one has a 5. That's why now I am fully on board. Good Lord. Flat 7 and root. Alright, so this makes a little more sense here. Now we've got the makings of our 4, then 3, and a half step. So yeah. Okay, so there is our lighter scale bringing us, this scale shape is normally called a different modal name than it's giving you here. It's giving you Phrygian, Phrygian, Phrygian. All right, so now we would have the so you can hear how it's very Phrygian and Locrian have that close relationship of just one note difference, but that one note kind of gives Phrygian that kind of passability out of the scale. Hear it. So, what this gives us then is failure to communicate. Okay, so now we'll go from, here's one last at Phrygian. Now let's change that one note. Locrian, Phrygian. Still got this very weepy interval series, but it's got this a little more hopeful than this. It just sounds tough to get over. So that would be like E Locrian. What I was trying to do there is experimenting with going from the, that's basically the 7 that wants to go to the 1. The 1, if we were playing E Locrian, the 1 is going to be a half step up from E, which is F. F major. All right, so I'm going to leave you with that today. We have the rest of these to go. The next one is going to have no root, and you can experiment with this if you want. Get out your graph paper, write everything down, and start experimenting with your 2 scale shapes. See what you get, and go from there. There is a harmonic major and harmonic minor bonus to one of these lessons, or one of these chord shapes up here. So if you want that information, that'll be in part 2. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the hype button if that's out there, just so we need to make this channel great. I hated that slogan, but I need to do something to increase the viewership of this channel. So anything you can do there to make this thing happen, it's everything everybody else says. All right, thank you for watching. I'm going to call it quits for that today, and we will we'll go from there. Now I got to figure out how I just set up new hotkeys to shut the recording off here. So take care, everybody. We'll see you in part 2 coming right up, and we'll explore the rest of these intervals and some of the crazy modal possibilities we have in store.